Hello YouTubes and welcome back to Telly's Marine Tales. My name is Chantal and on this channel we cover everything ocean and marine biology related, and today we're covering a topic that is really close to my heart. It is the research world that I live and work in, and that is the world of sharks. Now I do apologize if my voice is a bit nasally. I am recovering from the flu, but I could not put off filming this video any longer because as I'm filming we have reached the end of Shark Week, and I actually wanted to release this during Shark Week but couldn't get there anyway. I'm not actually the biggest fan of Shark Week. I mean, I find it to be very same and it really kind of just paints sharks in a singular light, and most of the time it's just about great white sharks. I mean, if we look at some of the titles from this year's Shark Week, we had Great White Battleground. And this was actually one of the only shows I did manage to watch. And it was really interesting. It was about how great white sharks may potentially be communicating with each other through their breaching behavior. So I don't really know why it was called Great White Battleground. I mean, they could have come up with a better title, but it goes with a theme. We look at some of the other titles. We have Great White Serial Killer, Rise of the Monster Hammerheads, Raging Bulls, Monster Maker Under the Rig, Clash of Killers, Monsters of the Cape. I mean, can we be just like a little bit more original? It's like all very much the same, and it all paints sharks in the same light. I mean, there seemed to be some cool shows. There was like one called The Island of the Walking Sharks, which was about an epaulet shark, which is a small shark that seemed to be able to walk like in tidal pools and stuff, which looked really cool. And there was also Stranger Sharks, which looked at just finding really cool and really strange sharks out there.
But of course, to do that, I'll need an expert in the paranormal, aka Noah frickin' Schnapp from Stranger Things.
This is spookier than the Upside Down.
Which is really cool, and I really feel like we need more content like that going further. But in today's video, I wanted to kind of like change the story a little bit, and instead of talking about how sharks are the monsters and the killers and the raging bulls, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we may be the monsters and the killers. And seriously, the title of this video is not clickbait. There are hundreds of shark species out there in real danger of going extinct. So in today's video, I'm talking about the science and what we as scientists currently understand about what's happening with shark populations, why it's a problem, why should we care, you know, if they're just monsters out to kill us, why should we really care, and maybe what we can do to start helping sharks and start reversing the problem. So I really hope you enjoy the video, and without further ado, let's dive into some sharky science. So what science is out there currently for us to understand how sharks are doing? Now, I'd like to clarify that most of the examples I'll be talking about refer to sharks and rays together. So rays, like your eagle rays, manta rays, stingrays, are essentially just flattened versions of sharks. They are together on the tree of life. They share very many similar characteristics, except for the fact that rays are flat. And so they're grouped together in a group called elasmobranchs. And so yeah, most of the studies I will be talking about look at sharks and rays together. And collectively, there are over 1,000 species of sharks and rays that occur basically in every one of our oceans across the globe. So if you want to try and get an understanding of how these species are doing in general, it's quite a large undertaking. But a landmark study that was published almost 10 years ago now, back in 2014, set out to do just this. And this is something you can't do in isolation. So these authors worked with over 300 scientists worldwide to try and get an understanding of how sharks and rays are doing around the world. And their findings were quite troubling. So they found that 1/4 of shark and ray species are in danger of going extinct. So this global assessment is quite old now, and so it was redone last year using new and updated information. And unfortunately, the picture looks even more bleak. Now, instead of only 1 in every 4 species facing the risk of extinction, we have 1 in every 3 species facing the risk of extinction. So the problem's getting worse, it's not getting better. And there was an example that they brought out, which really is just, it's really sad. So they found that there are 3 species of shark that are in all likelihood extinct in the wild. There's no more of them. And this represents most likely the first ever example of a marine fish extinction event. So throughout the years, throughout the fishing history, we've managed to do some damage in the ocean. We've managed to severely deplete populations of fishes until there's almost nothing left. But the thing is, there is always something left. There's always a small population that kind of escapes our fishing gear and manages to survive and reproduce. But there are these 3 species of sharks that have not been seen for years and years and years, and so they are now classified as extinct in the wild, and this is the first time we have actually managed to drive a global population of a fish species, because a shark is a fish, to extinction. And it might seem like a small number, but this just really highlights the trouble that these species are in, that sharks are in, and that the possibility of extinction is real. It's not just scientists saying they might go extinct. They will go extinct if nothing changes. Now, this problem is happening in all ecosystems, both near and far from land. So there was another huge study that was published back in 2020 that used a different method from the first 2 examples that I spoke about to look at how reef sharks are faring across our oceans. Now, when we say the word shark, I'm sure we all immediately picture the big great white shark, but I think a lot of us picture close behind that reef sharks. I'm sure we can all imagine little black-tip reef sharks zooming around coral reefs. These are very popular sharks. People love to dive with them. People love to snorkel with them. They're really cute, actually, if we can think of a shark as cute. And so yeah, this study looked at reef sharks specifically using a method called a BRUVS, which stands for a baited remote underwater video system. Essentially, you have a rig, you have bait on the one end, GoPro on another end, you chuck it down in the ocean, you let it record, and you see what's there. I do have a previous video talking about this in more detail if you want to check it out here. So again, this was a huge undertaking. They worked with 100 scientists from around 58 countries around the world and collectively analyzed 15,000 hours of footage on coral reefs, which, if you put it back to back together, amounts to over 2 years worth of footage that they collected and analyzed on reef shark presence on coral reefs around the world. And I'm sure you guessed by now, the picture is pretty bleak. They found that on 20% of the reefs that they surveyed, they didn't see a single reef shark. This is really troubling. And what the authors say is that even though there may have been like 1 or 2 individual sharks still around that wasn't captured on the video footage, it means that sharks are essentially functionally extinct in these ecosystems, which means there aren't enough of them to perform the ecological role that they're supposed to perform in reefs. And this is really troubling because coral reefs are incredibly important ecosystems in the oceans. We all know that reef sharks are necessary to maintain the health of these ecosystems, and without healthy numbers of reef sharks, we cannot have healthy coral reefs. So, as the lead author of the study put it,
that shows we have a crisis. Hundreds and hundreds of hours of video, and we see more trash bags than we see sharks, and that's really concerning.
Okay, so not only is this problem happening in coral reefs, which are usually right on our doorstep, close to the coast, but it is happening in some of the most far-flung places in the ocean, the places that most people won't even see in their lifetimes. So another big study, the last one I'll talk about, looked at what we call oceanic or pelagic sharks, which are these sharks that live way out there in the deep waters. They don't come close to the coast. And so they're pretty far from human populations. But despite that, again, the picture is bleak. I'm sure you get the story by now. But the authors found that since 1970, the global abundance of oceanic sharks and rays has declined by 71%. And now 3/4 of these oceanic shark and ray species are facing extinction. I really don't actually think I need to say more about those devastating numbers. Okay, so that's quite a lot of numbers, quite a lot of science, a few studies, which all essentially just boil down to the same thing. Sharks and rays are in a lot of trouble. And we really don't have to look far to find the culprits for the trouble that these sharks and rays are facing. It's us. It's overfishing. So all of these studies and pretty much the whole scientific community, if not most of the scientific community, agree that overfishing is by and large the major threat and the major cause of these population declines. We as scientists know that sharks and rays generally have a very slow reproductive cycle. So they take years to reach sexual maturity. They only produce a small number of offspring. They produce these offspring at infrequent intervals. So they have a limited capacity to sort of replace their numbers, unlike fish, which produce thousands of babies. And so essentially we are just taking out too many sharks from the ocean, and they don't have the capacity to replace those numbers. And we do this either intentionally, so a lot of the time we catch sharks and rays for their meat, for their fins, but then also it happens as accident, and we catch a lot of sharks and rays through something called bycatch, which I think is the major threat for these oceanic or pelagic sharks and rays. And essentially they just get caught by accident on the hooks or in the nets when fishermen are trying to catch fish or tuna or that sort of thing. So really, it's globally accepted. Overfishing is the problem. We kill millions of sharks around the world every single year, and this is what is driving the decline. But it's not all bad news, because there's essentially this one overriding problem that's causing most of the declines. We can focus our solutions towards this problem. And there are a number of shark populations around the world that are recovering. So for example, in the United States of America, they have started regulating their shark fisheries. So they've done a lot of science to ensure that they don't take out too many sharks. And so their shark populations are recovering. And there's also another tool. So not only can we regulate the fisheries themselves, but we can just provide safe places in the oceans for sharks to be safe in. So for example, through things like marine protected areas. If we think about a land example, we have these national parks where your wild animals like bears and elephants and lions can be safe in. We need places like that in the ocean. We need to protect the places where sharks breed, where they aggregate, where they feed, so they can just go about their sharky business, do what they need to do, and keep our oceans healthy. Because at the end of the day, that is why we need healthy shark populations. And it's very difficult to get people to care about sharks. You know, they're seen as these monsters, these predators, these very capable animals of looking after themselves, which they are, but unfortunately we humans are much more capable of destroying shark populations than they are of looking after themselves. So we really need to change the narrative, and we need to champion sharks. We need to get behind sharks. They are not the killers. They are the ones being killed. And we really need to start protecting them, and we need to start fighting for them, because we need healthy sharks for healthy oceans. And we need healthy oceans to sustain the human population. You know, we use the oceans for so many things, for meat and for income and for oxygen even. Like, we need healthy oceans, which means we need healthy shark populations. Okay, so this is Editing Chantel over here, and I wanted to quickly pop in and let you guys know of a way that you can potentially help sharks. Super simple. And I was really hoping my Sharky bracelets would be here in time while I was editing and finishing off this video, but unfortunately they're not. However, I do have the turtle bracelet, which I can show you. So these are these beautiful bracelets made by Farlow, and for every bracelet that you purchase, you get a cool animal to track, whether it's a turtle or a shark, depending on what you purchase, and a couple of other animals. And B, part of the money goes to the organization that works in the research and conservation of those animals. So if you buy a Sharky bracelet, part of the money goes to Saving the Blue, which is an organization that tracks the movements of these sharks. And again, this is really important because it identifies those areas in the ocean that we can protect to help sharks. So if you do this, it's a win-win. You get a beautiful bracelet, you help to protect sharks. So head over to Farlow, use the checkout code TMT20 when you're purchasing your bracelet to get 20% off. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope you learned something. I hope you have started changing your mind about sharks a little bit, started changing your perception about sharks. And yeah, as always, if you have any comments or questions, please leave them down below. And let's protect sharks so we can all have happy days together.